Selena Hill, and this is the new norm on Black Enterprise, where I speak to dynamic leaders, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and public figures about the impact they're making in today's world. Today, I have the privilege to speak with Ashley Allison, a CNN political commentator, a former senior advisor for the Obama Biden White House, and a former senior advisor for the Biden Harris campaign. Now, she is also the founder of Watering Hole Media, a new media company that centers Black and Brown voices and creates content to engage communities of color in politics through culture. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know you are a very busy woman. You are actually recording this while you are at the RNC, which is a huge convention, a lot going on there. So thank you again for making time for us. And I want to start by talking about Watering Hole Media. This is a new platform that you launched. Tell us why you launched this platform and tell us more about it.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me. So, I love working at CNN and it affords me a great platform and opportunity. But one thing that I did notice while being at CNN is that it's a linear program, meaning that it's 24 hours, new content all the time. And a lot of times we have to speak in sound bites. And in sound bites, it doesn't allow for us to go into deep conversation because there's so much breaking news all the time. So I wanted to develop Watering Home Media to really focus on Black and Brown communities, to really see what was happening in our group chats and take it offline and put it in proximity to folks. I know so many times I talk to people and they feel like the conversation is okay, but it's missing what they're looking for. They look at what's happening in the culture and they're able to make the direct political connection to what's happening in the culture. And so I figured, I went to a couple people who are leaders in this space and in the movement, and I was like, hey, I think you should do this. And they're like, we don't have time to do this. If this is something that you really care about, and you believe in, you should try it yourself. So they gave me the encouragement and motivation to start it. I had this idea back in 2009, believe it or not, and I started I started Watering Hole blog, back when blogs were a big, big thing. And so, it took some years to get it off the ground, but here we are, 2024, and one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, launching three important web series that focus on Black women, Black men, and BIPOC individuals to have the tough conversations that we need to have.
So I had a chance to watch the first episode of Wait a Minute. Love the conversation that you had. Tell us more again about just the content that you're creating and the premise of it.
Yeah, so Wait a Minute is a show with about Black women, by Black women. A lot of times people talk about us without having us in the conversation. So that was the first intervention I wanted to do, is to make sure that if we're having a conversation about a certain community, the conversation is led by them. So it's myself and two other co-hosts, Valencia Johnson and Joyelle Nicole Johnson. They're not related, but you'll see that on the show how that devolves. They may be cousins, who knows? But it's a conversation. We weren't sure where the conversation was going. It's not a scripted show. We get topics and then we go from there. So I hope folks check it out. But just to give you a preview, this first episode was right after the BET Awards and right after Essence Fest. And our Vice President, Kamala Harris, was at both. And people had commentary about her video at the BET Awards and her being at Essence, especially since the conversation about whether or not Joe Biden should stay at the top of the ticket. And listen, like, I was surprised in the conversation because it wasn't about Kamala Harris. It was about what it means to be a Black woman in leadership. And I think each of us, the co host, and probably yourself, I don't know you very well, but you probably have a story of when there was a benchmark that was laid out about what success or what it would mean to achieve a goal happen, and you reach that benchmark, and then as a Black woman that benchmark is moved, and it's never enough what we do. We have to always do twice as much, twice as better. And so that conversation unfolded. We had some fun, we had some serious talk, but it was from three very different Black women talking about another Black woman, talking about just the role that having someone, a Black woman in that position, or Black women running for office, or Black women sitting on the Supreme Court. It's just a conversation that honestly I haven't seen happen before just with Black women. Doesn't mean that it's not out there, but I just haven't seen it. And this week we're also dropping our show focused on Black men called Tap In. And listen, when I watched that, I had belly laughter. And you'll actually see these Black men have belly laughter sitting at their game table, playing cards, playing poker, talking about Drake and Kendrick's beef and what that means and how it's connected to politics, talking about vulnerability in Black men and why that shouldn't be such a big concept, because vulnerability actually just means you're being your full human self. And they really go in and talk about, they tap in, they're not afraid, they don't pull punches. And then finally, this next generation, Gen Z, definitely is leading the future. And we have this show called Everything is Fine. And we have a rotating host of casts that talk about the issues from abortion to student loan debt to gun control to LGBTQ rights. Really familiar faces that I'm sure some you will recognize and some you get to meet for the first time. But the whole concept about Watering Home Media is that it is not about me. It is literally about the collective. It is that we are stronger together. I have spent my whole career building coalitions that look and unify, and we're stronger when you do this part and I do that part, and we come together and make a stronger impact. And so that's what we're trying to do at Watering Home Media. I'm really excited. I'm exhausted, I do say, because I am at the RNC and trying to launch a media company and just trying to stay well and whole. But I think it's going to be dope, and I can't wait to see what comes of this project.
Yeah, and to your point, Ashley, I'm so glad that we're finally seeing more Black women talk about the political issues, policy and culture, and just tying it all together. Because, like, to your point, we all have like five different group chats at the
Yeah,
least. And, we're having these conversations sometimes separately, but it's all interconnected. And to your point about like with Kamala, and just that goalpost continuing to move. Like, she is one of the most qualified people to run in that position of government. So to have her, and then I'm constantly hearing commentary like, oh, she's not a girl's girl, or she's not Black enough, or I don't really feel connected to sis. And it's like, but why not? And why not
mm-hmm.
take a look, from a deeper stance, a deeper lens, and really peel back those layers? Is it that we don't feel connected, or is it that that's the narrative that we hear in media, or from
Yeah,
maybe some folks who aren't as informed? So I personally, again, enjoyed that first episode of Wait a Minute, enjoyed that
thank you.
segment on Kamala, and just how, again, like, I strongly believe that we need to support Black women. Like, I see,
Yes,
even though I don't always agree with her policies and some of the things she did when she was a prosecutor in California, I still see myself in her. Because
mm-hmm.
as Black women, we always have to go above and beyond. We always have to be perfected, and we're always going to have that level of criticism. And if we aren't supporting and standing for one another, then who is? This
That's
world
right.
is going to tear us down.
That's right. That's right. I have had the privilege of working for. She was a senator then, during the Biden Harris campaign, and I got to know the now vice president, pretty well, and her working style. And I just have to say, she was a delight to work for. I mean, she's a powerhouse. So I remember the first time somebody was like, "She's calling you. She wants to know the details," and I was like, why she wanted to know the details, like she's too busy. And they're like, no, she cares that much about how we're engaging Black voters in this cycle, how we're engaging young voters. And I would do a call with her about, ever since once she got announced as the vice presidential candidate, once a week through election, about, because I was running the coalitions department, which is responsible for doing outreach to all the different constituency groups. She wanted to know what the program was. She had ideas. Have we talked to this group? Have we not talked to that group? And it was always a conversation. And then I remember having the opportunity to sit down with her in her ceremonial office at the White House. And we had a very long conversation with about 10 other folks. And I mean, it went from A to Z, literally every topic was covered. And then again, I got the opportunity to be in her photo line at Essence last year. And you know how like you meet somebody and you just feel real comfortable with them? I got too comfortable with the vice president because I walked up to her like, "Hey, girl," and then I was like, oh, "I'm so sorry, Miss Madam Vice President," and she was like, "It's okay, girl." You know, like so when people see that, that's actually who she is, and it is easy to be overcritical of someone that you have never met before, or you see this profile of them that is how folks want you to perceive, but she is the real deal, you know, and I want to protect her at all costs, not just because of her, because I think it's always bigger than one person, but what's to come after her. You know, if we don't protect her in this moment, what are little Black girls to think about how they will be treated when they are growing up? I want the world that younger Black girls grow up to be better than the world that I grew up in. So
Yeah, and just to add on to that quickly, Ashley, before we move on, you're right. When from my brief interactions with Vice President Kamala Harris, she is very personable. She is very much that sister girl who you
yeah.
or that auntie that you feel like you can confide in, that you feel like you can trust. So to your point, like we do need to just make sure that we're not getting caught up in the hoopla
Mm-hmm.
and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that whatever assessments or criticisms that we're putting on others is fair. And we're
Yeah.
looking at that person in their totality and not just what the media tells. But,
Yes.
speaking of media, I do want to just get some of your thoughts on what is going on and just the political landscape because there's a lot going on and being shown in the media. For instance, we've seen just this, not too long ago, an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. What was your take on that?
Yeah, so I was actually on a flight to Milwaukee when I got the news. And of course, that's the one flight my Wi-Fi wasn't working. And I was very concerned and alarmed and had a lot of questions. I am glad. I do not believe violence is ever the answer. So I'm glad, even though I don't agree with anything that Donald Trump suggest in terms of policy, I also believe that everyone deserves to live with dignity and safety. And so I'm glad that he is fine and that I'm sure that it was a traumatic experience to have. I also am very sad that we lost people that day. And again, that individual, I think his name was Corey, who was at the rally, we probably didn't see eye to eye on anything either politically, but he had a family and he was a person, and that family's life will forever be changed. And I'm so sorry. That was unfortunate. You know, I'm still trying to make sense of it, quite honestly. And I think the most interesting thing that I have realized from that moment in Saturday is how not even bifurcated, but how splintered our communities are and how we receive information. There are people who have thoughts about the reality of what actually happened on Saturday that are questioning what really went down. There are people who are accusing other folks to being the cause of why something happened like that on Saturday, that shooting. There are people who are attacking Secret Service. People are just having different conversations, and what I realized, we were doing our editorial call this week for Watering Hole. And something that I always say to our contributors and our influencers that we work with is that you're a free agent. And I never want to censor what you have to say. But I will say our position as Watering Hole Media is that we want to see the investigation. We don't believe in violence. And everybody was in agreement. But then it immediately came to the question of like, why are people responding the way in which the way they are responding? And I think that we don't have the answers, but what I want to be able to do and cultivate with our company and with our shows is creating a space to go a layer deeper. If folks are developing conspiracy theories about what actually happened on Saturday, I want to know why. I want to know what about their experience with institutions and media makes them ask these questions that seem so counter to the narrative that is being pushed. Because I think you can only get to solutions and move forward and start to have real dialogue if you actually understand why and where somebody is coming from. We might not be able to get to all those answers before, but I think it's important to acknowledge how people are thinking and feeling, whether it be about the shooting on Saturday or about student loan debt. It's important to understand why people are feeling certain ways. And then I think you can actually go a layer deeper and get to some solutions. But to just, I mean, I'm not sure what happened on Saturday. I know that from working with President Biden, working with President Obama, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered about how this young man was able to get on the roof with the AR 15, why he even had an AR 15, why that gun is even legal to have for civilians. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked in our country.
Yeah, and to your point about the conspiracies, right? Like the culture's response, like first of all, the memes that came out were hilarious. Like putting Trump's head on top of 50 Cent's body and playing, many men. I
Yeah.
thought, leave it up to us to take the most disastrous issue or event and make it, relatable or funny. So I thought that was brilliant there. But then on the flip side of things, you do see people like Amanda Seals and others who may not be blatantly coming out and saying this did not happen, but sort of like alluding that, hey, this was planned. All of these missteps should not have taken place. Do we think that this was a tool that that former President Donald Trump was, sort of orchestrated himself so that he can look like he's a strong man?
Hmm.
And, I find that troubling as well because I feel like if we're not even going to believe certain realities, to your point, Ashley, how are we going to get to the solution, right? Like, if we're
Yeah.
not going to believe that this act of severe political violence took place, then we're not going to talk about the real issues, which is, gun control and the lack thereof, and just the issue that it seems like a lot of young white males are having about the lack of respect that they feel, and they're taking it out in violent ways. And those are the
Yeah.
things I think we need to talk about. But the culture is like, I don't know if that was really, if that really happened or not.
Yeah, and I think what I would just say is whatever your posture is on the reality of it or not, we have to go beyond Saturday, and we have to really discuss what's at stake in November. And I appreciate Black culture and being able to turn a frown upside down. I appreciate us always being able to find the silver lining even in the toughest situations. But there was an article that came out after that and said, like, is this going to make Black voters? Is the shooting of Donald Trump going to make Black voters resonate with him more? And I think we have to be really intentional about challenging those narratives. Being shot is not what my identity is as a Black person. What I want to know is, how am I going to be able to become economically stable? How am I going to be able to buy a home? How am I going to be able to keep my business afloat and profitable? How am I going to be able to keep my community safe? And so I think that we are so quick with the internet age. Look, I love the platforms. I love engaging with people on social media, but we have to do it with some responsibility. And so I think what we were trying to do at Watering Home Media is create an avenue to say, I hear you and I see what you're saying, but here's another perspective and let's have this conversation. Because if we get caught up in that incident and not really talk about the policies that allow for that incident to happen, I think we've lost the point. We've lost the thread. And again, um, I'm glad Donald Trump is okay. I'm sorry that man, that father, lost his life. I hope that we don't have any more senseless gun violence in this country. But the only way that will actually become a reality is if we make some real serious policy changes.
To your point, because I saw that headline as well, Ashley, and there is this narrative being pushed in mainstream media that Donald Trump is winning over Black voters. We saw in 2020, he won 12% of Black voters. He did especially well with Black men, winning 19%, and some polls are showing that he may even do better in November. Donald Trump himself has said, hey, me being a convicted felon makes me more relatable to Black voters. He's even pandered by selling gold sneakers. And, we've seen commentators say, like, oh, this is really going to win over the Blacks. What is this? What is behind this increased affinity that Black voters, particularly Black men, are feeling towards Trump?
Well, first, I want to say that people are allowed to have, in a democracy, you're allowed to have a difference of opinion. So if you are a Republican, I don't agree with you. I don't understand it, but okay. Like that's what America is about. I question, I'm talking to a lot of people who do a lot of polling directly with Black people. And some of the polling that we are seeing from more mainstream outlets doesn't align in terms of Trump support with Black folks. It doesn't align with some of the polling that folks like Cornell Belcher or Adrian Shropshire from Black Pack are doing, or Terrence Woodbury from Hit Strategies. So I think the challenge is that there is a narrative about where Black voters are, but then there's a lived experience that doesn't match up with that narrative, right? So, for example, I talk to Black people all day long. I talk to my family, who some voted for Donald Trump in the past, and I haven't interacted with 12 Black people who are voting for 12% of Black folks who are voting for Donald Trump. So I think when we hear this narrative, a lot of Black people are like, well, where are they? Are they hiding in secret? Why are they saying that they'll vote for Donald Trump to you, but not to their friends and family? We don't actually really know. Like this assassination attempt, definitely, we don't understand the impact it will have on this election. But what I will say is that Black people do not resonate with individuals just because they are a convicted felon, and we certainly do not resonate with people because they have been shot. We can empathize with those individuals because we may have had family members or friends. Heck, most of the people in America can actually empathize with people who have engaged in the criminal justice system. About one out of these statistics might be a little dated, but when I was really deep in doing criminal justice work, 1 out of 3 people in America had interacted with somebody that had been involved in the criminal justice system. And 1 out of 5 people in America had actually been involved in the criminal justice system. So it's not a surprise that people can empathize and understand about having someone who has been convicted of a crime. That doesn't mean that just because you know someone who's been convicted of a crime, you think that they should be the leader of the free world. Just like but gun violence is real in this country. Young people know that better than anyone. Gun violence is the leading cause for death for children under 25. So to think that seeing somebody in attempted assassination wouldn't resonate with them, they know that very well. It doesn't mean they think that this person should be the leader of the free world. So, I mean, I understand this narrative that is out there. It has just not realized for me in my lived experience, and how people make their decision. And we'll see in November. But here is what I will say is that it is the responsibility of candidates and campaigns to go out and communicate with Black voters and not assume we are not a monolith, which we talk about in Wait a Minute, is that like the 3 Black women sitting on that set, Kamala Harris, you and I, we are all different Black women. We all come from different walks of life. We have probably a great amount of similarities, but we also probably have a great amount of differences. It is important for the Democratic Party to, if they want Black vote, if they are concerned about the narrative they are hearing, they need to go out and have conversations with Black people and not assume that it's a guaranteed vote for the Democratic candidate. Also, they need to make sure that it's, maybe they don't go vote Republican, but they also could just stay home and not vote. And so don't take Black folks for granted. We are not a monolith, but we are a determining and deciding voting bloc in this country.
Yeah, and I just want to just point out, because, to your point, in 2020, I didn't really know, Black folks, too many, who were advocating for Trump. Now in 2024, I know two. And we've
Mm-hmm.
gotten into it. One of the church mothers at my church is an adamant Trump supporter. And, I had a conversation with her, and her reasoning was she literally sounded like she was just like spewing misinformation. She was like,
Mm,
well, Democrats believe in, killing babies after they're born and abortion in late term. And I was just like, Mother Ann, no, that's not true. And she was like, baby, you don't tell me because I know what I heard. And I really couldn't, tell her too much because what she's subscribing to. And then another person in my family, I try not to bring up Trump because again, she also feels like as a black conservative Christian woman, she
mm-hmm.
feels that her identity is under attack and she doesn't care that she's voting on a single issue, whether it is, pro being because she is pro life or other things that she finds valuable. She's like, hey, this is what's important to me and the left is not speaking to me.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel like, collectively, Black folks have always been socially conservative, just like the Latinx community. And I feel like is the left creating space so that socially conservative people feel heard and seen in these conversations?
Yeah, well, let me just talk to Mother Ann for a second. It is completely untrue that anybody in the Democratic progressive space is advocating for aborting babies after birth. It is actually completely untrue that people in their second and third trimester want to abort babies because they just want to. Most people who have abortions or need abortions in their third trimester is because it is either the baby is not going to survive and is actually it's the humane thing to terminate the pregnancy, or the life of the mother is at risk. If you talk to anybody, any OBGYN, any physician, any abortion care provider, you will understand that it is literally a humane choice that is being made. It is a very hard choice for most women in a third trimester to have to endure to terminate their pregnancy. I think the other thing that is important to know is that the world that we are living in right now is putting women's health at risk. Right now, we have abortion bans, I think, in like 18, 15 or 18 states, which means when women miscarriage, when women have complications with their pregnancy, their lives are at risk because physicians and abortion care providers aren't able to give them the care that they need. I think anybody, Republican or Democrat, would agree that everyone living in this country should have access to quality health care, including when you have complications with your pregnancy. Um, and then finally, I would just say is that to your question about are we making space for social conservatives? I think Democrats are a party, a big tent party, much bigger than the Republican Party. And I think we need to respect and honor where people are on certain issues. But I think we also, as the Democratic Party, really believes that every individual should have their own right to choose, whether it is whether they go to college or whether they don't, whether it is they buy a home or whether they don't, or whether it is they have bodily autonomy, control over their body. This is what the progressive movement is about. It's about having their own freedoms to make their own choice. And what Democrats and progressives really believe is that the law should be enabled to allow those individuals. That's really the idea of America. That used to be the conservative idea, and now the conservatives and Republicans have really become the party of big government that wants to be in your doctor's office, wants to be all up in your business. So I understand misinformation and disinformation is rampant out there. Some of the candidates are even saying it, but do your research. Understand what the real policies are. Just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's true.
Well said. Thank you for that, Ashley. I'll make sure I'll get this to Mother Ann. You are again very busy, so we don't want to hold you for too much time. Again, you are at the RNC. What do you say to those of us who feel helpless or powerless in this election, who say, hey, I'm a black voter, I've been voting Democrat, but I never felt heard. What do you say to them? And what is Watering Hole Media specifically telling those folks?
Yeah, so I just want to be really clear. Modern Home Media, we're a nonpartisan entity. So we actually fundamentally believe that if voters have factual and truthful information, they're smart enough to make the decision themselves. We aren't telling people which way to vote. Our co-hosts definitely have their own positions and they are allowed to, but as a company, we are not endorsing one candidate or the other. I understand people's frustration. Look, I've been in this system for a very long time. And there have been many moments where I have felt a loss of hope and despair. But I'll just tell this story. I started working at the Obama White House in July of 2014. It was a month before Michael Brown was murdered. People didn't know that there were tanks that were in police departments and that could go into the streets and tear gas protesters. People didn't understand the impact that prosecutors had on whether or not a police officer could be prosecuted for killing a black person in this country. People didn't really even know what qualified immunity is. And here we are 10 years later, where those militarized equipment and police officers are many of those pieces of equipment are illegal to possess and to buy. Here we are when people are acutely aware of what prosecutors do and are completely engaged in the fight to ensure that we have a Fonnie Willis or a Alvin Bragg in places where they can actually hold people not just accountable for criminal crimes, but for crimes against our democracy. Here we are where the conversation around qualified immunity, now granted, the law hasn't been passed yet, but the awareness of what qualified immunity even means from 2014 to 2022 is vastly different than any other issue that is somewhat niche for people, that is like a police reform issue. So I know progress can be slow, but it is stagnant if you don't keep trying. And I have seen change. Same-sex marriage is legal now. It wasn't the case when I was born, when you were born. It wasn't even the case while I was an adult. You know what I mean? I graduated from college before that had happened. And that happened, I mean, it's again, 10 years may seem like a long time, but it happened rather quickly. And I think that that can be the case for other issues. But the only way to do it is to stay engaged. I'll close with this. I say this on Wait a Minute. I always say voting is like being in a relationship. You can have a one night stand and vote one time and never see the person again, and they probably add no value to your life. Or you can be in a real relationship. You can be in conversation and communication with your partner. And your partner in this instance is democracy, is the candidate, is the party. You can have those tough conversations when you say, I'm a little disappointed in your behavior right now. That doesn't mean I'm walking away, but I'm saying I need you to improve so that we can grow together in partnership. But that takes effort. That takes commitment. That takes an ongoing interaction. And so I encourage people to be in relationship with democracy. I encourage people to be in relationship with voting. And you know what? When you are in relationship with people and they do you wrong, you can hold them accountable. But it is hard to hold people accountable if you had a one night stand with them and you never see them again.
There you go. Ashley Allison, founder of Watering Hole Media. Thank you so much for your time today. The work you've been doing, sis, to make sure that we have our freedoms and we have civil rights, they are under attack, especially in today's day and age. But we appreciate those of you on the front lines who are fighting day and night to make sure that we are all protected, especially the most vulnerable amongst us.
Mhm.
And to your point, I encourage everyone stay civically involved. That it's not just one election every 4 years. Local politics are the politics that matter the most. And like Ashley said, like no more one night stands. We need to we need a marriage, okay? And you hold that person accountable every single day. And that's how we need to show up in order to make sure that our voices are heard, and that we see our values and we see our representation in our political system. If we do not, then we will definitely pay the consequences, and the consequences will be severe. So, again, thank you, Ashley. Check out
Thank you.
Watering Hole Media. They have 3 great shows on YouTube. Make sure you guys go check it out and support that. And I'll see you again next time.